Alright, so you want to play Healing Touch? So originally I planned on making a video about Holy Light, but just as I sat down to make that, a big patch came out, and in that patch there was a brand new legendary for Healing Touch, so I decided to try it out. And I gotta say, it's pretty fucking strong. Just like in the previous video, timestamps will be in the description, and they should be on the screen now. And with that, I'll start off with core abilities. Spells you're looking to roll level 1 include Healing Touch, Life Tap, and Fade. My favorite thing about this spec is how easy it is to roll. You really only need Healing Touch and Life Tap, but I highly recommend getting Fade for PvE as you're likely to get aggro from stray mobs, and it's a great oh shit button. And as for a final ability, I would personally choose Arcane Intellect, but other options include Mark of the Wild, Powered Fortitude, Blessing Wisdom, and Sprint. Buffs are great for this spec, as you don't really need any other spell to function besides Healing Touch and Life Tap, so I highly recommend you taking one level 1, and if you're not interested in taking a buff, I recommend taking Sprint. It's great for PvP, but it's also good in PvE for movement mechanics, such as Morris's Feast. So now we'll get into powerful spells you're looking to roll while leveling. Like I had stated previously, you can actually complete endgame content with just Healing Touch and Life Tap, but there are still amazing spells for this spec that you're looking to roll. In no particular order, these spells include Tranquility, Earth Living Weapon, Power Infusion, Mana Gem, Innervate, and Life Bloom. Trank is a great party-wide heal. Earth Living gives you free healing power plus a hot. Life Bloom with the Evergreen RE, giving you great uptime. Mana Gem with Infused Gems for a haste CD. Power Infusion is a great baseline CD, plus you can run the Epic RE, Power of Generosity, which gives you a mini buff for casting it on an ally. And finally, Innervate is a flexible emergency mana CD. Now, I was going to list off a mid-tier of abilities, but I feel like most of them were pretty obvious if you rolled them, such as Icy Veins or Blink. So I'm just going to skip this section and go right on to REs. So like I had stated previously, what REs you have depend on what spells you roll. So I would recommend looking at what spells you have available to you, and then taking REs accordingly. But on the screen now are some of the previous abilities I've listed with epic REs attached to them, which are excellent choices if you roll them. So, Healing Touch is in an odd spot. There are almost zero good REs available to it, but with the introduction of Overflow, the spec has become viable. This RE alone carries the entire spec, and is the only reason it can exist. This is both a good and a bad thing. This is because the spec is really easy to get into, as all you need is Overflow, but it's also a bad thing because most of the power is front-loaded. Therefore, you won't see much scaling with additional REs. This doesn't mean the spec doesn't scale, you just won't see as much of an impact when fully RE'd. So with the lack of REs to choose from, you're really looking to get an ability tied to an epic RE. Luckily, there are two other epic REs that are universally available to all healers, these being Pendulum and Field Surgeon. Field Surgeon is somewhat underwhelming, but it's better than nothing, and Pendulum is honestly perfect for this spec. Additionally, if you have the option to drop Field Surgeon for another epic RE tied to an ability, I would highly recommend it. Now, for non-unique REs, we still face the same issue of lacking good and efficient REs to choose from, but here's what I consider good enough to run for most specs. Celestial Focus, Nature's Majesty, Overflow, Pendulum, Focused Healing Touch, and Lengthy Nature's Grace. So it's likely you already know most of these REs, and the other ones are just simple percent buffs for your main abilities, but I wanted to specifically point out Lengthy Nature's Grace. When you proc Nature's Grace, you reduce the cast time of Healing Touch by 0.3 seconds. This is really good, so you're looking to keep this buff up 24/7. Interestingly though, each Overflow proc is considered a separate cast of Healing Touch, therefore each cast has a double chance of proccing this talent. So I would honestly recommend dropping this RE if you have really good gear. Now we'll get into REs that I take specifically for my spec. I like to take Graceful Stride, Blessing of the Eternals, and Field Surgeon. I love using Graceful Stride as it lets me just kind of zoom around at will, and I'm honestly not missing out on much, maybe like 60 spell power. And I like using Blessing of the Eternals RE as it lets me free up a talent point. And finally, I run Field Surgeon because it's really better than nothing. Finally, I'll go over talents. I like to take Alacrity, Ardent Defender, Blessing of Eternals, Dream State, Elemental Weapons, Empowered Touch, Gift of Nature, Holy Guidance, Improved Tranquility, Living Seed, Master Shapeshifter, Moonglow, Naturalist, Nature's Blessing, Nature's Grace, Nature's Majesty, Purification, Raise, and Revitalize. Most of these talents I would consider core for most Healing Touch specs, but there's a few talents I run because I have the abilities to use them, these being Elemental Weapons, Improved Tranquility, and Blessing of the Eternals. But everything else here I'd recommend you take. And now that we're on the topic of talents, we'll go over what you should take as 1560 talents. I personally take Tree Form, Pain Suppression, and Beacon of Light. Pain Suppression is an amazing cooldown. I'd recommend every healer and tank should pick it up. Beacon of Light is amazing for this spec, as your heals are really high, so your beacon target gets a lot of healing, and these two spells I would consider required for this spec. I also have Tree Form, but you can honestly consider not running it because the buff doesn't stack between multiple players in a raid, and a good alternative, in my opinion, would be Shadow Fury. So that's the end of the guide. It's quite obvious that this spec is brand new, and it severely lacks REs, but in its current form it's actually surprisingly strong, and it's honestly pretty fun to play. And it's really easy to roll, so I suggest you try it out. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, and have a good one.